I think to understand why entrepreneurship is so important in today's business environment, we have to really consider the impact that startups have had and continue to have in driving innovation, reshaping markets, and transforming traditional ways of working. We know that startups frequently sort of bring groundbreaking technologies, products, or business models. They challenge existing market leaders. Startups in some way intensify market competition, forcing established businesses to improve efficiencies, lower prices, or enhance customer experience. As we can see right now, startups are accelerating the adoption of new technologies like AI, blockchain, cloud computing, and automation. Startups, identify new markets, opening opportunities which were previously unrecognized by established firms. In fact, they also, in a way, stimulate innovation within large companies by partnering with them or even creating competitive pressures for them in the industry. So in some ways, entrepreneurship is important because they bring innovation to the market. They enhance overall market efficiencies and responsiveness. I think there is a lot of evidence that also suggests they play an important role in driving economic growth, innovation, and job creations across various countries. So, for example, some of the recent sort of data from OECD suggests that startups and young firms account for nearly 50% of new jobs, despite representing only about 20% of the total employment. So in some ways, they have a huge impact on our lives and it manifests in various ways. I think leading a startup is exciting and very rewarding, but also very challenging. So if we think of developing new business ventures, there are essentially three distinct stages through which entrepreneurs take their new business idea. It's the ideation, incubation, and scaling stages as we identify them. And I think there are challenges related to all these three phases of the new business development, and the relative salience can change across these different stages. And it also sort of requires different types of skills and mindsets as we are in different stages of the new business creation. So we also see that many startups struggle to find the right product market fit before they run out of funds or don't pivot soon enough. So you have to balance fundraising, but also sort of focus on very sustainable spending of those funds so that you can take the venture forward in a more smooth way. I think as you grow, finding the right team to support the growth of the venture is also very important. People who are comfortable working with limited budgets, unclear sort of structure, evolving roles, and they have to be in some way also passionate about the entire idea of the entrepreneurial idea and the idea of the new venture as well. I think one of the big challenges is in the scaling stage is really finding what's the right time to scale, right? So you don't want to do it too quickly or too slowly. So finding that right time to scale, and again, finding the right partnerships so that you can create the organizational and the operational infrastructure required to rapidly grow the company becomes really important as well. There is, attention for a small firm, for entrepreneurs as they sort of grow the new venture. This innovation arises because the skills, priorities, and mindsets required for innovation can sometimes sort of conflict with the demands of managing and scaling the business. And you can see this tension sort of manifesting in several ways, in terms of focus on experimentation versus execution. Now, in the initial stages of the startup, you require a culture of experimentation, risk-taking, and willingness to kind of pivot as needed. Whereas when you're scaling, it's all about execution. It's about operational efficiencies. It's about being able to deliver consistent results So you have to keep, as a founder entrepreneur, you have to keep sort of iterating and pivoting between being flexible and being disciplined in the execution as well, to manage the risk taking with some form of stability as well, because innovation sort of thrives in some ways in terms of taking bold ideas, taking risks and going to the market and challenging the status quo. Whereas leading a new venture, eventually it's also about creating some form of stability, predictability, and showing a clear path to profitability for investors and for the employees in some ways. So you have to kind of also balance short-term and long-term priorities. The innovation requires long-term vision and investments in future technologies and market trends, and the returns may not be visible at the outset, but at the same time, you have to kind of balance it with immediate sort of revenue generation prospects as well. So, founders and entrepreneurs, I think one of the things we see struggle a lot with letting go of control. This is not surprising because it's their venture, it's their idea and vision for the startup, and they want to, and they're quite attached to it. In that sense, it's hard for them to delegate and give control of the venture to others. But you can't run the venture by yourself. So at the end of the day, you have to bring people, you have to bring the execution teams, the management teams into the venture, and just sort of, learning to let go, I think, is important. And it's also a mindset. I think balancing strategic thinking, again, execution and long-term strategic thinking is important as well. But this is not just entrepreneurs. We see this, even in the context of large firms, this constant sort of balancing of short-term and long-term priorities becomes important. I think you need to really have an ability to build high performance teams, because your teams become very important in terms of delivering on the vision of the entrepreneur. And so assembling a team that complements the passion of the entrepreneur with disciplined execution, I think is an important thing as well. I think leading a new venture is really a continuous learning process, and it requires like a growth mindset in some ways, and also learning from failures, right? So not everything you do will pan out as you imagined. So understanding why failures happened along the way and what you can sort of take from them as you sort of improvise your approach, both in terms of sort of growing the venture, but also managing the teams inside the startup would be important. So generally, startups sort of benefit from structures that are flexible, agile, and adaptable. What is the right structure at a given point in time? It largely depends on factors such as the size of the stage of the startup, the industry, what's their business model, and what's their strategic goals. In general, I think we know that the structure follows the strategy. So I think being aware of how the strategic priorities of the startup are changing and sort of aligning the structure to those strategic priorities would be important. And you have to always balance between being innovative, but also being able to execute more efficiently on the idea and scale it up. So even if initially the structure is flat and informal, in the sense that everyone is sort of stepping in and performing roles as the situation demands, as the startup sort of scales up, we need a lot more clarity and communication about who is responsible for what, for example, who is accountable for what. And structure brings that clarity into the startup, by sort of, clearly defining the roles, responsibilities, and creating accountability, and also sort of establishing processes along the way, which would be important as the startup sort of scales up. So there is no one size fit all structure. Most startups sort of initially benefit from a flat structure. Then they need to transition into more specialized ones, those that are really aligned with their strategic priorities. The key, of course, is to maintain flexibility and clearly communicate through the growth phases about the division of labor and the expectations of different roles within those structure.